The way air defense is structured, Dave, is that picture concentric circles around India, where you have each of the systems that you've just named responsible for one particular circle in that set of concentric circles. It's a weapon that even NATO and the United States acknowledge to be one of the most formidable and intimidating air defense weapons. This one weapon alone has resulted in many NATO, counter deployments of similar systems in the NATO territory. So the S-400 is definitely the big daddy of Indian air defense. Like the devil really lies, the nightmare of getting all these systems to talk to each other. How does one system communicate that it has failed? To the other? When does the other system know that it needs to kick in and take over target tracking because Circle 5 has failed to intercept? To me, and let's not mince our words, it was at that particular point of time after India has conducted an air attack, your air defense should have been world class. There are some people who tried to paint a picture that the Air Force was clueless about it and they didn't know about it until much later. That's rubbish. The Air Force is not so stupid. After the mistake had happened, there was an oh my god moment. Most definitely, and went through the entire command structure.
Hello and welcome to the 35th episode of Inner Defense, and a very, very happy Independence Day to all our listeners and viewers. Happy Independence Day, Shiv.
Happy Independence Day to you, Dave, and to all of our viewers. And the commitment of Inner Defense is that we're at work on Independence Day like millions of our fellow citizens.
Yeah.
Pushing out another episode, a very important one.
Yeah, very important one.
Yeah.
But before we start, I want to actually read out a comment from one of our viewers on YouTube. And the reason I want to do that is because it's by somebody called Amar Bawa. Mm-hmm. And he says that in his life, this is the first ever time he's commenting on anything on social media.
Wow.
And he said that if you do say my name, I will be immensely grateful for that. And I will remember this for always. So I did want to bring this up. And he also said that we should do a podcast on snipers,
right.
Indian Army snipers, and how great they are and
Dave, I think the most requested topic that we usually get is special forces.
Yes.
I've seen at least a handful of comments of people saying sniper rifles and assault rifles in general. I just want to promise our viewers that Dave and I have been postponing this for a long time because there is so much to talk about.
Yeah.
We might actually do 2 episodes because there is so much venting to do on that topic, but we promise to do it very soon.
Definitely, very, very soon. But this week we'll talk about something very, I think it'll be fun for the two of us, especially because I think the episodes on which we have the most amount of fun are the ones where we kind of go into nerd territory and talk about gadgets and stuff like that. And this is going to be about India's air defense system.
Yeah.
On the face of it, it seems a very simplistic concept, Shiv, to me, which is what I want to begin with. That, you have something incoming, either an aircraft or nowadays drones or a missile, and you throw something in the air. Throw is a very weird way of saying it, but you get my point, to take it down. Then why do you have this long list of, systems? You have... Just read it out. You have something that's known as V-Shorad.
It's very short range.
You had something that was known as a Trishul system. You have the Akash system. You have a Maitri system that has apparently been shelved. It was never brought into picture. You have the QR-SAM. You have the SR-SAM. You have the Samar system. You have the Spider system. You have the Barak 8 system. You have the S-400 system, which we'll talk about on this episode specifically, bought from Russia. And you have a project known as Kusha that's currently under development. Samar, which I mentioned, the reason actually we thought of doing this is because there was a report this week that another version of Samar is going to be tested sometime soon with a different missile, longer range, etc. Samar 2. Samar, by the way, very sort of unimaginative name, stands for surface-to-air missile for assured retaliation system anyway. Anyway, my question to you, for a simple concept like this, to me, I could be completely wrong, but to me, a simple concept like this, why do you need this variety range of systems?
So that's a really good question to start with, Dave, because, on the face of it, air defense, you're absolutely right when you say air defense is, when you boil everything away, it's a very simple concept. Let's first define what air defense is. Air defense is basically the defense of, of territory from an aerial threat. If you've got aircraft or missiles or helicopters or drones or any kind of threat that's coming in from the air, the way you protect it is the use of air defense assets. So it's a fairly simple thing. The reason why it is so complicated, and trust me, in this episode, we're going to go very deep, longer than that list you just read, because believe me, that list is long, is because air defense, in its execution, in its structure, in its complexities, in its challenges, is enormously difficult. Because what you're basically trying to do is hit a very small object in the air, usually moving at a pretty high speed, with an unpredictable kind of trajectory, with another object of similar or slightly smaller size. You're hitting a helicopter with a missile, or you're hitting an aircraft with a missile, or you're hitting a drone with a missile, or you're hitting a drone with an anti-aircraft gun. So it is complicated because you're basically trying to hit a fast-moving target on a large battle space, using very limited means, and in extremely limited time, because that thing is heading screaming towards you. In a kind of typical air defense scenario. And all of these collected together make air defense extremely complicated, one of the most challenging aspects of warfare. And remember, air defense is something that is not new. It has evolved exponentially over the decades. Air defense was first obviously seen during the World Wars, when air power was first applied, from World War I to World War II, when the real first anti-aircraft guns started coming into play. After that, you've seen missile-based air defense coming in, which we're going to talk about mostly right now. You talked about the S-400 system, which is the latest thing that we've imported from Russia. But like I said, so as a concept, it's very simple. But given the different kinds of threats, given the kind of unpredictability of these threats, given that you don't know for sure where that threat is going to come from, for a country like India, which has 32 lakh square kilometers to govern, you're talking about a continent-sized air defense bubble to protect. Of course, not all parts of the country are threatened by air. Some parts are much more than others. But even given that, it's a geographically enormous area to basically keep under a bubble and watch at all times. Imagine being on a constant state of alert for any kind of an aerial threat coming in from any different direction, and needing to have enough assets to be able to intercept those before they land on your territory. That is the essence of air defense.
Right. So let's talk about the different systems that we have. I think we can briefly focus on the three main ones that I thought during my research were the top of the line. You have the Akash system, you have the Summer 1, which is already which has been inducted. Summer 2 is upcoming, and then of course you have the Balakot, and you have of course the S-400. If I'm not wrong, I think you were in Russia.
Yeah.
When we were about to, place the order, we had placed the order, and I think you were reported from factory, if I'm not wrong. So give us an overview of these different systems, their capabilities, and would I be right to say that the S-400 is the best that we have right now?
So, when people talk about air defense, many people make an error of involving missile defense in that. Now, India has a ballistic missile defense program, which is in essence an air defense program in terms of the technology, but I'm not going to get into that because that's a completely separate kind of technology. That's a strategic kind of weapon. We will restrict this episode to air defense using missile systems and other weapons that are aimed at incoming aircraft, drones, cruise missiles, that kind of thing. And we'll perhaps do a separate episode on India's ballistic missile defense. So the way air defense is structured, Dave, is that picture concentric circles around India, where you have each of the systems that you've just named responsible for one particular circle in that set of concentric circles. Now, I'm going to simplify this because it is complicated. The S-400, for instance, is an air defense missile system with a range of roughly 450 kilometers upwards, which means, in essence, the missiles that you fire from an S-400 can intercept an incoming aerial threat out to a range of 450 kilometers. So let's assume that 450 kilometers radius is your outermost circle in this concentric circle. The S-400 is what is called an intermediate surface-to-air air defense weapon system. 450 kilometers may not sound like a lot, but it's a hell of a lot. It is way beyond visual range. It is way beyond the Earth's curvature. It is longer than most systems can see. And right now, it is most definitely the Rolls-Royce of India's air defense systems. It is by virtue of its range, by virtue of its reputation. We've seen it being used in the Ukraine war as well. By virtue of its, the manner in which it's been deployed and tested and demonstrated. It's a weapon that even NATO and the United States acknowledge to be one of the most formidable and intimidating air defense weapons. This one weapon alone has resulted in many NATO, counter deployments of similar systems in the NATO territory. So the S-400 is definitely the big daddy of Indian air defense. Like you rightly said, it's a Russian system. I was there in a place just outside St. Petersburg where this system is actually manufactured. I was there for some of the testing of the Indian systems before they were delivered. So just to update our viewers, we've ordered 5 regiments in total. This is not secret. This is open source information. 3 have already been delivered. 2 more will be arriving sometime around 2025, 26. And we may actually order more, or we may co-produce some of those systems here in India. So that's concentric circle number 1, outermost circle. When you move in a little bit, you've got something called the MRSAM, which is the medium range surface to air missile. Now, this is a missile with a range of about 70 to 150 kilometers. And this is also your kind of medium range interception circle. So this is circle number 2. Now, the MRSAM is basically a land-based version of a missile called the Barak 8, which India's DRDO developed in collaboration with the Israeli aerospace industries. Formidable missile, has been tested widely. It's a naval version is available on some naval ships also. Excellent missile. It's been proven and it's now in service. So that's circle number 2. I'll finish this list and then I'll tell you why there are so many circles. After that, you've got a missile that you named just now, which is the Akash. The Akash and an improved version of the Akash fall under the sort of short to medium range category, where they intercept incoming aerial threats out to a radius of about 30 to 50 kilometers. 30 to 50 kilometers. So that's circle number 3. We're coming in, we're moving towards the center of this concentric circle set. After the Akash, you've got... Akash is a completely indigenous system, mind you. Fully made in India. The motor, the rocket propellant, everything, it's 100% Indian. After the Akash, you have a concentric circle where the radius is about 8 to 10 kilometers, where a system called the Spider system comes in. The Spider is a completely Israeli system. There's a notorious incident which we've talked about, which happened during Balakot, where a friendly fire incident happened. That was the system that was responsible for it. Again, a very good system, but it's there at circle number 4. After circle number 4, and there are between circle number 4 and circle number 5, which is the last circle right at the center, there are a few systems that the army has. There are systems like the Pechora, which is an old Soviet system, and a group of other smaller, missile-based systems that are there. Numerous to name, but they're there. But they're quite obsolete. They're quite old. India is actually trying to phase them out right now. The OSA, AK, and various other vintage Soviet era missile systems are there. And the last terminal defense, as it were, right at the center of this circle is called VSHORADs, which is very short range air defense. And here again, there are lots of different things. There are shoulder fired missiles like the Stinger, the Igla. There are vehicle, or tracked vehicle mounted missile systems like the Shilka or the Tunguska, which have anti-aircraft gun systems. There are anti-aircraft gun systems like the upgraded L70, and ZU-23. These are all, again, vintage anti-aircraft gun systems. So the VSHORADs would basically kick in if all the other circles have failed, possibly all the other circles have failed, assuming it is that long range a threat. Let's not forget that not all aerial threats are coming from more than 450 kilometers away. Some of them may be coming from 15 kilometers away, in which case those outer circles don't kick in at all. Like, for example, let's just take a very simplistic example like Ladakh. If an Indian aircraft flying over Ladakh is threatened by other aircraft coming in from China, and from about 15 to 20 kilometers away, literally 15, you're not going to have the S-400 kick in. You don't need that kind of system. Circle 3 or 4 would be adequate to take care of that kind of threat. Again, very simplistic. When air defense systems kick in, it usually means war has broken out. They hardly ever do. So I caution my viewers again when we say that, these are just to paint a picture of how these things actually work. So now we've painted this picture, Dave, of this set of concentric circles, of varying capability, varying range, varying interception range, varying kinetic range. All of these different criteria are there for the capabilities of these missiles. Their kill probability is another variable in all these things. But if you boil down all these other complexities just for the purposes of this podcast, it is basically a kind of layered, phased air defense system where the guy on the outside is trying to penetrate all of these layers to hit a target that's somewhere at the center of these concentric circles. If the first layer, if the S-400 fails, the other kicks in. If the other fails, the other kicks in. It doesn't happen in sequence either. Sometimes, these things don't happen in such a beautiful, neat way. The handshake between one system and the other, and I'll come to that because that is actually where the devil really lies, the nightmare of getting all these systems to talk to each other. How does one system communicate that it has failed, to the other? When does the other system know that it needs to kick in and take over target tracking because Circle 5 has failed to intercept? That kind of command and control and battle management between all these various disparate systems, which, let's face it, are from different countries with different software, and all of them being used by the Indian military, is a very, very difficult thing. And I can tell you it's an uphill, constant struggle, and it is not a problem that India has solved yet.
Yeah. And we will go directly to that because that was going to be my chief focus area on this episode, is that the missile systems, the missiles themselves, they're very sexy. But there is a very unsexy element to all of this, which is the most important one. And I think they don't get their due enough: radars. Yeah. Because you can have your missiles, but you're gonna do jack shit if you don't have something to spot the enemy in the first place. So tell me about how do we, like you said right now, how do we go about even analyzing the threat in the first place? Do all of these systems have their own radars? Do you have this national grid? Yeah. Or do you have this command center somewhere in Bengaluru or maybe New Delhi? Bunker mein there are people watching every space and like, okay, that's gone, and you hit a button like, okay, S-400 fired, oh, miss, second button, second circle, third circle, so on and so forth. Does it happen like that? So what is it?
Very, very important that you ask that because this is also a work in progress as far as India is concerned, and I'll explain why. In peace, let's first remember that each of the Indian armed forces have their own air defense assets. So, like I said, the Navy has air defense weapons on its ships, like the LR SAM or the Barak, and various other kinds of systems. The Army has its own also. The MR SAM that I just named is a weapon system that the Army also deploys. And the Army also has certain air defense missile systems, which are of a more tactical nature, short range, to protect their establishments or their high value assets and things like that. So each of these services have their own kind of combat and battle management systems. They've got their own structure. They've got their own, sensor to shoot a loop, as it were. They've got their own command and control system. So the Navy has its own command and control. Army has its own command and control. Air Force has its own command and control. However, and this is very important, overall air defense of the country is the responsibility of the Air Force. Of course. The Air Force takes care of all responsibility. So the grid that you were asking about is what is called the Indian Command and Control System. I think I stands for Indian. It's IACCS, which is basically a national air defense grid where the entire command and control is with the Air Force, which means the Air Force has control over air defense assets, no matter which service it belongs to.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Now this is in theory. This is in
what's
theory. Now, getting all these different battle management systems of the Navy, Army, and Air Force to actually work together as part of a comprehensive, integrated, and cohesive grid is and I'll say this with politeness, work in progress, because it's still being fine-tuned. There are still issues, there are still glitches in terms of getting all of these systems to work together. And it's not because people don't want them to work together. There are genuine command and control complexities involved when you have all these challenges that I've just described. But like I said, the overall responsibility is with the Air Force. Think of it like this, when we paint a picture of this kind of giant bubble, whenever anyone thinks of air defense, most people think of a kind of giant invisible bubble over a country, a kind of shield or a dome. Iron Dome is how Israel describes its system, right? So that's actually very evocative, because that's what they intended to be, a kind of dome around a target. Very similarly, air defense is actually never really a dome. It's actually a bunch of small domes, shifting domes in different parts of the country, because at no point can a country have one giant dome around it. Forget country. No reasonably large piece of land can have an effective air defense dome around it, because it simply doesn't work that way. You can never have an 100% impregnable dome. So what we have in our country under this Air Force command and control system for air defense is a prioritization system. You've got priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4 of what your different national targets are that would most likely be hit by aerial threats. So you would have things like your national assets, basically all your military bases, your weapon sites, your airfields, obviously cities, your nuclear establishments, your energy ports, energy establishments, that kind of thing, mines, anything which has large economic value, big infrastructure, bridges, that kind of thing, are all categorized and prioritized according to this matrix, which is a matrix that shifts. Sometimes one particular facility may not need the kind of protection that a facility that's closer to the border might actually have. As a result of the standoff in Ladakh breaking out, an energy facility in Uttarakhand might be much more at risk than, say, something in Punjab. So all I'm saying is there's a kind of flow that takes place. The flow of war, as it were, that influences the shifting of priorities in terms of where air defense assets need to be allocated and prioritized. So you can move your missiles, you can move your S-400s. They're on wheels, remember that. Let's never forget that the air defense is not stuck in one place. It's not nailed to the ground. These are highly mobile, very, very movable systems. They're built that way because countries need to be able to move their systems around. So the S-400s can be moved very, very fast. Right now, some of them may be in Rajasthan or Punjab or wherever. Tomorrow, if they need to actually be deployed for the defense of the national capital territory, they can do so. They can be moved and they can be put somewhere near Agra or somewhere to protect or Ambala. Ambala is in Haryana is actually the city that is designated as the air defense node for Delhi. So like Ambala for Delhi, there are several different nodes, as it were, in different parts of the country that have an air defense responsibility. So if you're with me, instead of this huge dome surrounding the country, you have small nodes bubbles that act as kind of mini command centers that are capable of quickly popping up domes at will. It's almost like I need to order a dome over this particular place, and that command center will make it happen. And right at the top, it's the Indian Air Force that's overseeing this very, very intricate dance of air defense. But literally owing to the fact that there are not enough resources to have this kind of dome, there are gaps, and there will always be gaps. And this is not unique to India. No country in the world has a dome. Every country has gaps. Some countries have less gaps than others because they've got less threats, a geographical distance from their enemies, etc. India is in a nightmare situation. Our enemies are at our borders, right on our doorstep. And with a country like China that is hugely boosting its aerial capabilities, especially in the Tibetan region, Xinjiang, etc., India's air defense becomes a huge national priority in the last 4 years.
Yeah. We'll talk more about the complexities of, using such a setup in the first place, but after a quick break.
Somebody was criticizing, I think at very early stage of the Olympics, was doing Instagram reels there. For them getting AC instead of fan in Paris. And was it somebody else?
Goswami.
Yes, Priyanka Goswami. So people were saying that, is this why we send our Olympians to the Olympics, that they can make reels out of nothing? They are making content because they don't get paid enough and they have to sustain.
Yeah.
You make sure that you get paid. How much are these guys getting paid and how much of the support are they getting outside?
Yeah.
Neeraj said it beautifully. He's saying that, yes, the development of Indian support has happened incredibly well over the past 4 or 5 years. But the same support the European American athletes are getting from 50 years. Do you not think that makes a difference?
Like a Manu Bakar now is going to be the darling till 2028.
Yes.
Where she's going to perform again. But we tend to forget these guys, like an Arjun Babuda might not be remembered after 6 months.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Shiv and I are discussing and talking about India's air defense systems and air defense system, rather. And I think before the break, Shiv gave us a very nice, detailed, vivid picture, illustration of how exactly this entire system looks like and the gaps that are there, etc., etc. You spoke about how it's not one giant dome, but rather like small bubbles that can pop up at will whenever you want. And I think China is a good example, because I was thinking the same thing, that you did not have until 4 years ago 50,000 troops on that border. Now all those troops are at risk from airstrikes. So of course you need something to kind of defend them from all those from the threat. Talking more about the aspect of using the system. How much of it is manual? How much of it is automated? Because, at the beginning of the episode, you talked about how these threats are high speed, right? I would imagine that if an aircraft from a base near the Ladakh LAC in China would take off, it would reach the LAC or the border within 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes, right? That's not a lot of time for, you calling up your superior and he calling up his boss and maybe someone calling up the PMO ki bhai kya karna hai, should we shoot the S400, should we shoot this or not? So how does it happen in that command center? Is it manual? Is it automated? How does it happen? It's I can't figure out how it would work.
So this is where we get to the core of what is called the sensor to shooter loop. The sensor to shooter loop is the basically the distance between a threat being detected, identified, tracked, confirmed, and when a shot is actually fired towards that threat. All countries obviously want to lower that sensor to shooter loop as much as possible, because reaction time is everything when it comes to air defense. You're absolutely right, Dave. When you ask whether this is manual, because how could it possibly be manual? Now, two answers to that. Just to paint a picture of how not black and white these things can actually be. First of all, air defense systems are highly manned and womaned because they are systems that require human oversight. They require humans in the loop at all in all places, because these things cannot be left to machines. Because you've got aerial threats which are by their very nature difficult to classify as whether they are friendly, where they are headed. Is it really something that's a threat to you, or is it just a passing aircraft? Again, I'm simplifying, but I'm just saying. So these things require a human in the loop. But if you have a human in the loop, doesn't that add to the the time taken.
Yep.
Doesn't that add a burden to a system? Wouldn't it be better if it was just AI? And I'll believe me, there are questions. There are the current research and questions in military research very much talk about why AI and rudimentary technologies like facial recognition and recognition of objects and machine learning cannot be rolled out and deployed in something like air defense, where it would be extremely effective. And I'll answer that question as well. But first of all, no, humans are definitely there in the loop, because you can't have errors. In countries with a large amount of aerial movement, you've got a lot of aerial movement in terms of civilian aircraft, you've got a lot of aerial movement in terms of private aircraft, helicopters, drones, you've got military aircraft flying all over the place, everywhere. So there has to be a human in the loop as far as this kind of thing is concerned. The way things are tuned up is that training and constant protocol fine-tuning and course correction makes these systems very, very swift in their response. So if you've got an aerial threat and you've got a priority one, let's take, for example, a priority one target and the air defense system node that is responsible for it, the kind of reaction time that you will see to an aerial threat could be measured in seconds. Because in such cases, resources have been committed towards keeping it literally on red alert at all times because of the scale of the threat to it. In some other place, that kind of priority, readiness might be a little lower because the threat may be from much further away. In the very unlikely scenario that China will mount an air attack in Ladakh, because India actually has a huge air power advantage in that area, air defense systems on the Indian side would be able to detect it very, very fast. The other reason for that is because in Ladakh, your troops and the systems on the ground are anyway on red alert. They are watching every Chinese move. So it's very unlikely that an aircraft can even taxi on their runway without Indians knowing about it.
Wow.
Right? Forget about it suddenly appearing through the clouds. That would not happen. So always remember that the essence of air defense is to make sure that you kill that air threat as far away from your territory as possible. So, finishing off that aircraft or deterring that aircraft from taking off is also air defense. And we've discussed this idea of deterrence before in earlier episodes as well. Putting a Spider system in Ladakh, any system, an Akash or a Spider system in Ladakh, will make a Chinese Air Force planner think 5 times before deploying an aircraft into the air in that sector. And that is air defense. That's air defense without firing a missile. So air defense is not just this fireworks of things flying in the air and smashing into each other. Air defense is also deterrence. Air defense is also, hey, I've got S-400s in Arunachal Pradesh, for instance, in theory. So you better not be thinking about building that airfield. Let's think of this also beyond the tactics, right, Dave? Like, if India has S-400s in Assam or Sikkim or somewhere, it might dissuade China from even thinking of building an airfield there. Like, अरे यार, उनके पास S-400 है वहाँ पे. What's the point of building an airfield? I won't be able to use my aircraft over there. All these things go into thoughts as well. So air defense is also the use of resources to make sure that you don't have to fire those missiles.
Yep.
Which is why deployments of air defense assets and stuff, you see it in the press all the time. Akash has been deployed to Arunachal Pradesh. Spider has been deployed to Srinagar. This, that, and the other. It's commonly, and it's never denied by the military, because these things act as deterrents. When countries know that other countries have air defense system, it's like a warning. Of course, it gives them information about where those other gaps may be, but it tells them that the air defense system, is ready and is on alert. So it's a complicated system, but humans can never be out of that loop. They have to be in that loop.
Yeah. And I think the example of Sheikh Hasina fleeing Bangladesh is a good example, because I think the request was given to the government of India at a very, very short notice. What we know is that the army gave her around 45 minutes to leave the country. For a Bangladeshi Air Force a transport plane to suddenly pop up from Dhaka and go fly towards India, you'd have to tell everyone stand down.
Yeah.
Okay, we know it's coming and we are allowing it. So if it was automated, things could have gone wrong.
And even in that case, they've at least 3 Rafale fighters were in the air.
Yes.
For the entire duration of that. They were not escorting the
Right.
C-130 of Sheikh Hasina, but three Rafales from the Hashimara base in Bengal. They were in the air. They took off immediately. And what you're talking about, which is making sure that everyone stands down about this, that's actually a slightly more straightforward kind of aspect, because here you're talking about flight management,
Yes.
identification, and that grid is very, very well oiled. There are the chances of a mistake happening there are quite low. But you're very right in pointing that out, because that's a military aircraft in a country that's imploding.
Yes.
So that kind of thing. So, but I think it's only because it was Sheikh Hasina on board that things went really, really smoothly.
Yeah, right. We'll circle back to what we spoke about just before your break, and I think to a topic that is one of our favorites, which is about jointmanship within the 3 services, among the 3 services, sorry.
Yeah.
However, on this episode, I am quite conflicted. Normally, I share your rage when it comes to stuff like this, but on this, I'm just not very sure how to figure this out. Perhaps which is why we have, like you said, that those gaps, and perhaps why it's work in progress. So if my research is right, you have the Army and the Air Force, Navy to an extent, but Navy, I understand once again, the ships are out at sea, so you can expect them to have their own air defense systems, the ships at least. The Army and Air Force kind of more or less share most of the air defense systems. The Akash, for example, is shared. The Balakot 2 is shared in the sense that both of them have the same systems. S-400, I think, is operated by the Army. But like you said before the break, that the larger operational command and control is with the Air Force. I don't quite
No, the
get that.
S-400 is with the Air Force.
Is with the Air Force. Okay, sorry. Yeah, right. Which is why I think General Bipin Rawat, when he put this idea in mind of having theatre commands, the one command was supposed to be the Air Defense Command, which was supposed to be the sole responsibility of the Air Force. The Air Force, like we know, was not very, very happy with the theatre command concept. We've discussed that briefly on a previous episode. I wonder if it was because of this, because on the face of it, and I'll be frank, as a layperson, the idea of the Air Force suddenly having just an Air Defense Command sounds quite unsexy, because, for the longest time you're used to having this image of you are the Air Force, you have all these nice aircraft, you can take off at will, etc., etc. Suddenly you have your resources divvied up between 3 separate commands, and you have been given this Air Defense Command. Very, very important, because the first half of this episode, you've quite given us a very, very good picture of how important it is, and it's quite sexy, by the way. But anyway, that's just one aspect of what I'm trying to talk about. So you have all these different assets, you have different services. You spoke about how they will have their own, command and control systems, etc. How do you marry all of them together? And maybe then the Air Defense Command idea was bang on, and perhaps we need that ASAP.
The idea of a function-based command that looks into a particular function rather than an area, rather than a theater, is a concept that is there in many countries. United States has a special forces command, these kinds of things, and they have their merit. They most definitely have their merit. My own view about something like an air defense command or an aerospace command, which was also recommended. In fact, in the early days of this whole idea of jointmanship, there was an aerospace command as well. Is that you haven't even done your basic jointmanship groundwork yet to be able to execute something like an air defense command. The second question you asked on this podcast about how all these systems talk to each other. Let's talk about our air defense systems themselves. The battle management systems, the command and control systems that exist within the Army and the Navy and the Air Force do have a degree of cohesion. There's no doubt about it. Like I said, the Air Force is the overall overseer of air defense in the country, and that is the correct thing. It should have, because Air Force is about strategic air powers, air defense and air power. So there's no question of it. In which case, at what point do we start talking about the Army also having its own air defense assets? There's something called Army Air Defense as well.
Yeah, the entire core to it.
There's an entire core. But that's of a much more tactical nature, because that is about defense of smaller units, smaller establishments and stuff. And it makes sense. There, it isn't strategic. It's about it's a battlefield asset, very much like like armed helicopters, attack helicopters, and things like that. And we've gone down that tunnel many times in the past. Now. The challenge before we even talk about something like an air defense command is to get this connective tissue right before you impose something like an air defense command. The approach, in my view, and this is only my view and I'm going to be attacked for this as well, is that you're trying to impose an air defense command in order to effect this cohesion.
Wow. Interesting.
Right? It's being looked at the other way around. And for me, it's always I've always seen it as a little counterintuitive. Now you've got a fundamental issue in terms of connectivity between the services that is spawning all these command and control issues, real world gaps in air defense, time lags in your sensor to shooter loop, a not suboptimal allocation of resources in terms of air defense in different parts of the country. Resulting in a subpar use of your assets. And it's not like India doesn't have air defense assets. We've got billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of air defense assets. But and I'm not saying that the military is just sitting around not knowing how to do it. They're highly professional services. They know exactly what they're doing, and they often work with very, very little. And they're expected to execute very challenging tasks with little time and little money. But what I'm trying to say is that there needs to be a step further in terms of this jointness. Jointness has to be, you use the word sexy, and you have no idea, Dave, how important and how telling that word is in terms of the kind of resistances we see within the services, in terms of, letting go of a few things, gaining a few things in exchange for a larger ideal, which is, military cohesiveness. People will argue back saying, oh, Shiv, you don't understand how it works in the military. Aisa nahi chalta hai. That's not how it works. You're dumbing down this issue. And I get this quite a lot, by the way, especially on the issue of theaterization. But like you said, like from a lay person's perspective, it is that ultimately it has to be about absolute bang for the buck. Yeah. And it has to be 100% fail safe. It has to be 100% fail safe. It has to be extremely effective no matter what the threat. And most people in the country would probably scratch their heads if you told them that the Army, Navy and Air Force, they get along fine, they work brilliantly together, but there are some issues. Most people would say, what issues? Why are we still talking about theaterization? I thought we already had that. What is this jointmanship nonsense? I thought this bullshit was taken care of long ago. People say, what are we, I've had conversations with people saying, Arey, what is this jointmanship? Who are they not to work together? There are all these different things that come up, but these are much more complicated issues than that. It's not like two people sitting in a room and refusing to cooperate with each other. Even though it may look like that, especially from those videos that we've seen of Bipin Rawat and Air Chief Bhadoria, that the Air Force should be a support arm, that infamous episode. Those things have not... those things have scared the Air Force into a corner in terms of what it is willing to give up in terms of command and control. And I'm not surprised by that, because the Air Force has become suspicious that the system is looking to shortchange it in terms of what its levels of responsibility are going to be, and it doesn't want to give that up. So there are turf issues, there are sexiness issues. Believe me, there are. And all of these things will come into play. But I feel that imposing something on top of this while these issues are not sorted out is going to be is not going to happen. It's like a bunch of colleagues who don't get along in an office, and you impose a boss on them who just screams his lungs out, and that is your solution to getting them all to work together and be okay. That's not going to happen.
I think that's the perfect way to put it. I think the very, very good thought, actually. Right. Last couple of points as we close this episode. The future of such systems. Kind of, ironic that I'm talking about this the moment after you've just said we haven't even sort of the present of India systems. But anyway, the future. You spoke about Iron Dome. I think that's like the best visuals you can see of an air defense system, and also I think that's probably because it's the one that's being used the most often these days in Israel by Israel. We obviously don't have anything like that, but I'm not sure. I mean, you can tell us more about that. But with this current ongoing Gaza conflict, Gaza war, Israel-Hamas war, you've had this talk about AI being propped up a lot. There have been allegations that Israel has been using it in various spheres of its offensive on Hamas, Iron Dome being one of them. You kind of refer to it in one of the previous answers that you gave right now. So let's talk about that. The idea of using AI, the idea of using modern tech to kind of lower that the threshold of the shooting, like you said, and perhaps put less of a stress and burden on human beings, but also the fact then the quandary of, I forgot the thought experiment, but that age-old experiment of you have a trolley going down a hill on track. You have 5 people on it, and you can divert and kill 1 person, or you can keep going straight and kill 5 people. What do you do? Something like that is definitely going to happen with AI, and also with perhaps human being. Air defense, not really an offensive thing, it's a defensive thing. However, you also have to factor in, if I shoot down that fighter jet, for example, there, maybe only the pilot dies. If I shoot it down over here, which is farther away, maybe it will crash into a city of mine, which might end up killing more people. You get my drift. So talking about the future of air defense systems and integrating AI with it, where do you see it and what's happening in the real world actually?
I think AI is an inevitability when it comes to military systems, especially systems that involve detection, tracking, target locking and things like that. So whether it is air combat, whether it is, radar systems, whether it is, all manner of sensor systems, visual or electromagnetic range type systems, AI is going to be a part of it and is already a part of it. An example is the use of AI in, target identification in autonomous systems that are used by Israel right now over Gaza. Their Hermes 900 drones employ AI to remain in the air for hours together and use AI to detect particular targets. They've got pre-fed coordinates or pre-fed criteria in terms of what to look for that may look like a certain thing, and they use AI to track those targets and keep an eye on them and generate, a kind of action list for military planners in Israel. So AI is being used. There's no question about it. Even drones that are used along with loyal wingman type drones that are used along with fighter aircraft or helicopters, they have a measure of AI already worked into their flight systems that allow them to function autonomously, detect targets on their own, figure out what to do next, etc. So the inevitability of AI in something like air defense is already there. It has already come, and it's going to become much more dominant. I don't see humans ever exiting the sensor shooter loop. That can't happen unless you're in a ridiculous Star Wars like scenario, and I hope we never reach that stage. But I don't see why it can't happen when AI is being used for such rudimentary things like facial recognition, in most complicated of areas, facial recognition in crowds and things like that. AI to detect objects, AI to detect aircraft, missiles, that kind of thing is most definitely going to be there. I see AI playing a role in terms of shortening the sensor shooter loop, providing actionable data to a human much faster to take that final kill shot decision, which a human can take. Now, whether that human is pulled out of that loop is going to be some kind of a robotic future when Skynet becomes self-aware and stuff like that. But until then, I think AI is going to be very much play a role in terms of these things that I've mentioned. The other aspect of the future, since you mentioned that, Dave, is space. We don't talk about space-based weapons. That could come in the future. Right now, we're only talking about ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, aircraft, drones, helicopters, things like that. Space-based weapons, weapons that deploy lasers, these kinds of things, they're all going to be, threats that have to be taken into account as well. How do we factor all those things in? So air defense is moving really, really fast, as is air power. And, the technology that is going to be required to detect aerial threats is going to become exponentially more difficult, and it's not going to be possible to do it without tools like AI and things like that.
Yeah, right, right. So as we close the episode, we'll just take all that we've talked about and put in a real scenario that actually happened, an unfortunate one, Balakot.
Yeah.
Post Balakot, the day after, we've spent not an entire episode, but we've talked about what happened up in the air. The offensive part of it, of Abhinandan Vardhaman shooting down a Pakistani jet, and what happened after that, etc., etc., etc. But let's talk about the air defense aspect of it, because this actually is the perfect scenario for air defense, right? So you had your jets go on and bomb a place in Pakistan. Your systems are on high alert, but like you rightly said, they always are on high alert. I'm guessing when you say they're on high alert, what you mean is you probably had all the seniors, awake, not sleeping, and in office, on shift, monitoring everything, making sure nothing was going wrong. Then you had this group of fighter jets taking off from Pakistan, going towards a couple of depots of your army towards Jammu. So you scrambled your fighter jets. You had a Mi-17 helicopter taking off around the same time, and you had it being shot down by one of your own missiles. Tell us about what that situation was like for the Air Force. We know about what happened with us dispatching our fighters and dogfight in the air, so that was taken care of. But what exactly went wrong for us to end up shooting a missile towards our own helicopter? And second, what was the immediate reaction within the system? Because you also had a crisis on hand, by the way. I'm pretty sure everyone, people involved must have known that very second, oh shit, what we've done.
Yeah.
Maybe a few moments later, journalists like you who are quite clued in, even if you chose not to reveal it to the public or break it, you also had a feeling, okay, this is what has happened. But within the system, till the level of the Air Force Chief, for example, till the level of the PMO, when did the realization occur, this is what has happened? And was it priority at that moment? Okay, that's happened, but we have a life situation where there are pilots gone missing. We don't know where he is. He probably has been taken by Pakistan. So what must that have been like for the Air Force?
Let's not mince our words. That was a disaster. It was an absolute unmitigated disaster, and it exposed India at its worst at a time when it should have been at its best. Okay, and I'm not talking about the rest of that engagement, but this particular incident. This was a Mi-17 helicopter that was taking off from Budgam, which is just outside Srinagar, on the morning after the Balakot attack, and in very brief, it was shot down by a missile that was launched from Srinagar, which accidentally hit this helicopter itself. Now, what happened was, you remember I was talking about those nodes, air defense nodes, which are responsible for bringing up air defense bubbles where needed. Now, the node for the Kashmir area at this point of time is Bhatinda. Okay. Bhatinda is in Punjab, and there is a well laid out, very well defined sensor to shooter loop where you've got officers, you've got personnel, you've got systems on high alert. And this is a day after India has conducted an airstrike on Pakistani territory, for hell's sake. So your system couldn't possibly have been on higher alert. But high alert carries its problems as well. Think of it as a system that is so primed now for a retaliatory attack from Pakistan that everything looks like a threat. Add into this mix the fog, not the fog of war, but the fog of intelligence, everything looking like a threat, a helicopter taking off and appearing on a radar screen somewhere, looking like someone has infiltrated your territory at a time when you've got Pakistan Air Force fighters in the air just outside the line of control near the Rajouri area. So obviously people have been court-martialed for this and dismissed from service. But to pull away the complexities and bring it down to its basic, obviously people in the sensor shooter loop either didn't want to take a chance at that split second when they needed to bring their professionalism with all the information available to detect whether this was a friendly or a friend or a foe. They took that wrong call, probably because they were so highly strung with the situation at hand. And this was a monumental error. I'm sure they wouldn't have intended to do that. There's no question of anyone intending to do that. And they will carry that guilt all their lives because, I think 7 or 8 personnel died in that in that crash, or their own people, right? But it was, to me, and let's not mince our words, it was at that particular point of time after India has conducted an air attack, your air defense should have been world class. It should have been it should have been absolutely bulletproof. That was the time for it to actually shine, and you basically shoot down your own helicopter. It basically showed that no matter what your systems, no matter what your code red and red alert and highest state of readiness, and you've conducted an air attack, but you've shot down your own helicopter with your own people in it. In my personal view, that in many ways negated. It negated, from a military perspective, the audacity of going and striking across the country. You've gone and struck across the border, which is amazing. A creditable, brave feat of punitive action against another country. But just hours later, you've displayed to the world what your air defense actually looks like. And it was terrible. In the system, it became... I remember while reporting it, it was very unclear because even at that time, because of the fog of war and because of a total reluctance in the system to reveal any information about that, most of us got to know, some hours later, towards the evening, that it was a helicopter of ours that had been shot down. I didn't report it immediately, even though all of us knew about it because there were sensitivities involved and things were still being confirmed. There was no official statement just yet. But the system knew immediately what had gone wrong. It's not like the Air Force and the government didn't know immediately that this monumental screw-up had happened. Fatal screw-up. And Siddharth Vashisht was the pilot of that helicopter. I actually had met him some years before, so I knew him. So there was information about that. I got a call from some people asking, who were the people on that helicopter, and it was a muddle for us in the civilian sphere. But make no mistake, in the government and the Air Force, they immediately knew. They knew minutes after the crash that this had happened. And also because, remember, by that time there were social media videos of the crash.
Yes.
There was a famous video that a Kashmiri man had taken off that helicopter. That emerged on social media, and then it became clear that it's a Mi-17. Now, there are some people who tried to paint a picture that the Air Force was clueless about it and they didn't know about it until much later. That's rubbish. The Air Force is not so stupid. After the mistake had happened, there was an oh my God moment. Most definitely. And went through the entire command structure. Nothing worse than this can happen. There's literally nothing worse. And that missile from Srinagar to Budgam, that helicopter hovering over Budgam, would have been just a handful of kilometers. Just a few kilometers. The intercept range of the Spider system is anywhere between 10 and 20 kilometers. And nothing at all. It was right there in visual range, and it was shot down. So it was unforgivable, and people have paid the price. So I don't want to hammer them more on that, but the message from that was a terrible, terrible one. And I think the Air Force, because of the compulsions, political and otherwise, the story needed to be dumbed down for a while, silenced for a while because of the whole Abhinandan Vartaman drama that was playing out. But yeah, it was a very, very shameful and sad day, and the Air Force and the command structure is still going to have to work to kind of heal the wounds of that reputational damage that day did.
Right. Right. I think we'll end it there. Great episode as always, and thanks for your insights. And I think really, I said at the beginning of this episode, I think we're gonna have a lot of fun, and I think we did. Talking about the systems, and I think the illustration of the concentric circles, I think really just like kind of clears the whole picture of how an air defense system really works. So thanks, Shiv,
Thanks,
as
Shiv.
always, great episode, and thanks as always to our producer Anna Priyadashini. Thanks also to our viewers and our listeners. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and don't cross any boundaries with passport. Bye bye.